I woke before dawn, the sky still a slate-gray hush, and the world outside my modest apartment window silent, except for the occasional rumble of a passing delivery truck. My phone lit up with a message from my boss, another service call scheduled before sunrise. It was late November in Toledo, Ohio, and the chill had arrived overnight. I pulled on my work boots, leather softening around my ankles, and laced them tight. My name is Marisol Castillo, and I've been an AC technician for 8 years. It isn't glamorous, but it's honest work. I pride myself on knowing the heartbeat of every system I repair, the hiss of refrigerant, the hum of a failing compressor, the subtle change in airflow that signals a clogged filter. I've patched leaky units in suburban ranch homes and swapped out motors in downtown lofts. I've spent endless hours beneath dusty furnaces and inside cramped attic crawl spaces. And every time I flip the switch and feel that first rush of warm or cool air, I think, I did that. But today, this Thanksgiving, I wasn't thinking about compressors or refrigerant or airflow. I was thinking of my sister Daniela and her wedding invitation. She'd insisted I was welcome, said that family mattered more than anything. But every group text had devolved into jabs about my career path. One cousin bragged about his promotion at Goldman Sachs. My aunt posted a picture of Danny's white and gold dress with the caption, "Banker's big day ahead." My mother tried to change the subject to side dishes and table settings, but my sister kept steering it back. When I arrived at the Curtis family home, the sun was barely peeking above the rooftops. The long driveway was flanked by maple trees stripped of most of their leaves. The branches reached out like arms beckoning me forward. I parked my van, toolboxes rattling in the back, and felt that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. This was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it felt like walking into a storm. Inside, warm light and the aroma of turkey draped the house like a blanket. The dining room table was already set with crystal glasses and fine china. A chandelier cast a golden glow on polished oak. The silverware gleamed. Everything screamed wealth and careful curation in a way that made my chest tighten. I walked through the living room, nodding at family members I barely recognized, neighbors, distant cousins. They clustered by the fireplace, chatting about Oprah interviews they'd seen, the stock market's upward swing, the merits of AirPods Pro. I murmured greetings, noticing how my patched-up Carhartt jacket and scuffed boots drew stares. I'd worn my best. A faded denim jacket over a warm cardigan, jeans that were clean but showing their age, and the same Vans sneakers I'd been wearing all season. Practical over polished, always. My mother, Rosario, spotted me and her face softened. "Mijo, you made it!" she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "You don't need to work today. It's Thanksgiving. Enjoy your sister's day." But before I could respond, Daniela stepped forward, clad in a silk blouse and designer jeans. She gave me a tight smile. "Marisol, about that, you know we couldn't really keep everyone waiting." Her voice had that clipped edge, the one I'd grown used to over the years. My chest clenched. "You're an AC tech, am I? And honestly, the family thinks, well, they think it's not the professional image they want at my reception. They think I'm not good enough." The words landed like ice cubes. I blinked and shook my head, the sharp sting of betrayal rising in my throat. "Donnie, come on, I'm your sister, you invited me." She raised an eyebrow, her lip curving into a smirk that sent a wave of shame through me. "I invited you to dinner. Not to walk you down the aisle, Marisol. There's a difference. We need everyone presentable." She glanced over at the fireplace group. I felt the weight of 100 eyes on me, all waiting for my reaction. My mother's gentle hand on my arm faltered. "Sweetie, it's just a, holdover from old school expectations." "Holdover?" I repeated, voice trembling. "You mean you want me out because I fix air conditioners for a living? Because my job doesn't come with champagne toasts and stock options." My voice was louder than I intended. Conversations halted, heads turned. Suddenly, the warmth of the house felt like a furnace turned to maximum, stifling and overwhelming. My sister's smile sharpened. "Maybe next year," she said, the syllables dropping like stones. "Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Just take it outside, okay?" I stood frozen, heart hammering in my chest. My mother opened her mouth to protest, but my father shot her a look that said, "Not today, Corale." The group by the fireplace murmured, uncomfortable, but not rising to defend me. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. But I couldn't cry. I wouldn't cry. Not in front of her. Not in front of them. I turned on my heel, head down, and walked toward the front door. Toolboxes scraped against the hardwood floor with each step. My lungs felt tight, as if the world had constricted around my throat. I reached the doorknob and paused, hand trembling. The wind outside whipped fallen leaves against the glass, painting the pane with shifting shadows. They'd taken away my place at the table. My family had exiled me for being who I am. I twisted the knob and stepped outside into the cold. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality I felt deep in my bones. I stood on the porch for a moment, the autumn air biting at my cheeks, as my heart tried to catch up with my brain. This Christmas, I promised myself, will not come with their rules. A plan began to form in the back of my mind. One as precise as any service schedule, one kept on my calendar. If I could not sit at their table as a sister, I would redefine what family meant. If they judged me by my job, I would show them the power in knowing how things worked, from the ground up. The street was empty and still. The houses on either side looked like silent sentinels, their windows dark. I could still hear faint laughter through the walls behind me, the echoes of a meal I was not allowed to taste. I straightened my shoulders, squared my jaw, and took a step down the front stairs. Leaves rustled beneath my boots. The van waited at the curb. The world was cold, but it was mine to conquer. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. The first hour in the van was quiet. I didn't drive anywhere, I just sat there, in the driver's seat, fingers curled around the wheel as my breath fogged the windows. My toolbox rattled every time I shifted my weight. The smell of coffee grounds and engine oil filled the cabin. I stared at the house where laughter still leaked through frosted windows, and wondered if Daniela even noticed I was gone. It wasn't just about being uninvited, it was the way she'd said it, the sharpness, the casual cruelty, like I was disposable. Like the years I spent fixing their busted heaters in winter, and their overworked AC units in July meant nothing. I was the help, not the family. I took a shaky breath and turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. I didn't know where I was going, but staying there wasn't an option. I couldn't cry in my own driveway, not in the van that paid my bills. The roads were nearly empty Thanksgiving morning. A thin mist clung to the pavement. I passed quiet homes with lights glowing behind drawn curtains. Occasionally, I caught a glimpse of a family setting the table, carving a turkey, or pulling kids away from the TV. I couldn't look too long. At the red light near Perrysburg, I finally grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a while. It rang twice. "Hey, Mari," came a voice that was warm, surprised. "You okay? It's Thanksgiving." "I know," I said, and the crack in my voice must have said more than I wanted. "What happened?" "Daniela kicked me out," I muttered, said I wasn't presentable for her guests. A pause. Then, "She did what?" "Forget it. I'm driving, just didn't know who else to call." "Come over," my friend Iris said. "Mom made too much. You know how she is." I hesitated. It had been months since I'd seen Iris. Work kept me moving. The last time we caught up was at a bar downtown, where she told me she was applying for a civil engineering fellowship in Chicago. We used to be inseparable. She knew the version of me before I was a business owner, before I learned to keep receipts and navigate permits and convince contractors to take me seriously. "You sure? I'm texting you the address. Get over here. Bring your van. Mom's furnace is making a noise again." I laughed despite myself. "Never stops, does it?" "Nope," she replied, "but you do. For food, today." I changed directions. By the time I pulled into her mother's driveway, the sun had started climbing, burning the mist away. A few leaves still clung stubbornly to the trees, fluttering like warning flags. Mrs. Reyes greeted me with open arms. Her hair was wrapped in a silk scarf, apron already stained with flour. She smelled like cumin and roasted garlic. Mija, what did they do to you? Look at your face. Come in, come in. Their house was smaller, humbler, but it felt alive, real. The windows were open a crack, letting in the scent of fall. A pot of Araz Khan gandules bubbled on the stove, and turkey gravy simmered next to mashed yuca and garlic greens. It wasn't Martha Stewart perfect, but it was home. Iris poured me a glass of juice and handed me a plate. You don't have to talk about it yet, she said, touching my shoulder. Just eat. I sat, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel like an outsider. After lunch, I took a look at the furnace. Sure enough, it was wheezing like a smoker with bronchitis. A few parts needed replacement, but I had spares in the van. As I worked, I felt something settle in me, something firm and steady. Fixing things made sense. Problems had solutions. People, not so much. When I finished, I stood and wiped the grease from my hands. Iris leaned in the doorway, watching. You should start your own firm, she said. You're better than half the guys I've hired for city contracts. I have, I said quietly. Not a firm, just me, Marisol Repairs. Her eyes lit up. Then scale it. Seriously, you have the mind for it. You always did. I didn't say anything at first. Because the idea had been there for years, tucked in the back of my mind like a blueprint I didn't dare unroll. I knew the ins and outs. Knew how much paperwork the city buried small businesses under. Knew how hard it was for someone like me to be taken seriously in male-dominated contractor spaces. But still it had been whispering to me, expand. You're serious? I asked. Dead serious, she replied. And you know what? My cousin runs a grant program for women-owned trades. You could apply, get a jump start. The weight of Daniela's words came rushing back. Not presentable, not professional enough. I stared at my hands, calloused, strong, stained with years of labor, and I made a decision. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. I pulled up the state registry for businesses. I typed the words, Castillo Heating and Cooling Services. It felt like pulling a ripcord on a parachute I'd been wearing for years without realizing. The paperwork took time. The fees stung, but I had savings. I'd been careful. I was always careful. I worked through the weekend. Between service calls and late-night sessions at the kitchen table, I filled out forms, applied for Iris's grant, designed a logo, and printed business cards. By the time December rolled around, I was booked solid. Word spread fast. Clients loved my work. They liked that I explained what I was doing, never talked down, and didn't overcharge. One woman hugged me after I fixed her elderly mother's failing unit and said, "They don't make techs like you anymore." I smiled, because they never had. 2 weeks before Christmas, I got a message. From my mother. Just 6 words. Daniela needs help. She's desperate. I stared at the screen. My hands were trembling. My first instinct was to delete the message, block the number. But I didn't. I replied, "What's going on?" The reply was immediate. Her tuition fund has vanished. She can't finish her MBA. I blinked. Vanished? I tapped out another message. Did someone steal it? My mother's reply was hesitant. No, it was under your name. It was in your trust. We forgot. Forgot? I remembered now. My grandfather had set aside money in a college fund under my name. But when I chose not to pursue an academic path, decided instead to go to trade school and get certified, the fund just sat there. I hadn't touched it. My parents had always treated it like Daniela's backup plan, and I never fought it. Until now. I opened my bank's secure portal. The account was still active, untouched, over $80,000. I stared at the number for a long moment. My hands were cold. Then I closed the tab and sent one message to my mother. She made her choices, so did I. No reply came. 3 days later, Daniela called. I almost didn't pick up, but I needed to hear her voice. Mari, she said, voice shaking. I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I said, please. I can't graduate without this. I'll lose everything. You already lost me, I said. Please, it was one bad day. It was the day you showed me who I really am to you. I was wrong, okay? You matter, your job matters. Just help me, please. I paused. Daniela, do you even know what I've built these past few weeks? She hesitated. No. Good, because I did it without you. And I'll keep doing it without you. I hung up. I didn't cry. I printed new business cards that night. On the back, I added a quote, built by hands that never quit. The next day, I received a letter in the mail. The grant had been approved. Castillo Heating and Cooling Services was now fully licensed, funded, and recognized by the state. I opened a bottle of cider and stood on my tiny balcony, watching snow begin to fall over the rooftops. And then my phone buzzed again. It wasn't Daniela. It was the president of the Ohio Small Business Association. Marisol Castillo? We'd love to feature you in our Women in Trade Spotlight this January. We think your story could inspire a lot of people. Would you be open to a filmed interview? I froze. My name, my story, my work, finally seen. I took a breath and said yes, I'd be honored. But I had no idea what was coming next. Because the next person to walk into my life would change everything. And she was hiding a secret tied to my past. A secret that would make me question everything I thought I knew about my family. The email arrived just after sunrise. Subject: Women in Trades, Spotlight, Confirmation, and Next Steps. It was official. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, coffee cup in hand, the warm steam rising to meet the cold morning air that snuck in from a cracked window. Snow blanketed the street below, each flake softening the world outside, but inside, my thoughts were buzzing. The interview was scheduled for the following Thursday. A full camera crew. A 20-minute featurette. My face, my story, front and center on the Ohio Small Business Association's online platform. They were sending someone over to prep me. Not just anyone. A producer, they said. Someone named Aubrey Fontaine. I Googled the name immediately. She wasn't local. She wasn't even regional. Aubrey had produced segments for PBS and the BBC. She'd once covered stories of women leading the charge in male-dominated industries, from welding yards in Detroit to robotics startups in Berlin. Her presence alone meant this was bigger than I thought. I took a long sip of coffee and stared out the window. And then my phone buzzed. Good morning, Ms. Castillo. This is Aubrey Fontaine. I just landed. Mind if I stop by this morning to go over logistics? I blinked. My van was still dusty. My living room was half storage closet, half workspace. There were blueprints pinned to the walls, tool manuals stacked on bookshelves, and 3 clipboards lined up on the coffee table, like soldiers waiting for orders. Sure, I replied. I'll see you soon. I scrambled to clean, swept sawdust from the floor, wiped grease smudges off the door handles. I lit the candle my aunt had given me last Christmas, patchouli and cedarwood. It didn't mask the scent of metal and motors, but it helped. When Aubrey arrived, I expected someone cold, maybe severe. But she was tall, warm-eyed, and wrapped in a thick wool coat. Her hair was tucked into a beanie, and she carried a leather satchel across one shoulder. Marisol, she said, shaking my hand firmly, I've heard so much about you. Your grant application was one of the most compelling we've read this year. Thank you, I said, stunned. She took a slow look around my apartment. Stopped in front of a framed photo of me standing next to my first repair van, the words Marisol Repairs printed with tape across the door. Is this where it started? I nodded. I bought that van from a retired electrician who told me he couldn't imagine a woman running her own HVAC route. That's when I decided I had to. Aubrey smiled. That's going in the story. We sat, she asked questions, lots of them. About my training, the first time I ever opened up a unit, the worst job site I'd ever been on, the moment I knew I wanted to work with my hands. People like you, she said, are changing what the trades look like. You didn't follow a script, you wrote your own. Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I opened the account holding the college fund again. It sat untouched. Daniela hadn't reached out again, neither had my mother. It wasn't guilt I felt, it was resolve. The money had been put in my name. And now, it was time to use it. Not for vengeance, not to rub it in anyone's face, but to grow something. A legacy I could be proud of. I transferred $40,000 into a new business savings account. With that, I could afford a second van, upgrade my licensing to cover larger commercial systems, and begin hiring. Hiring. That word felt like climbing a mountain I'd never thought I'd even approach. But I already had someone in mind. 2 years ago, I'd worked alongside a young woman named Tasha at a community volunteer event. She was sharp, precise, curious. She'd asked me 100 questions about the tools I carried, and I could tell she wanted more than just a summer job. I found her number, sent a text. Tasha, you still interested in learning HVAC systems? I've got something brewing. Her reply came 30 seconds later. Yes, just tell me when. I smiled. 1 week before the interview, Tasha and I met at a job site, a small community center where the heating was spotty and the vents sounded like groaning monsters. She was all in. I showed her how to check airflow differentials, read pressure gauges, and troubleshoot pilot light issues. She took notes, asked questions, climbed into crawl spaces without flinching. This is like detective work, she said once. Like figuring out what's wrong just by listening. Exactly, I thought. Exactly. By the third day, I had her prepping jobs on her own. The day before the interview, we finished early, so I took her to the coffee shop near the old train depot, where I used to go on my breaks. We sat by the window. You're good at this, I told her. If you stick with it, I'll cover your certification. Her eyes widened. Why? Because someone should have done that for me. Because you belong here. She looked down, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Then she whispered, my last boss told me women like me should stick to clerical. I felt anger burn in my chest. Then let's prove him wrong. The next day, I stood in my kitchen, adjusting the collar of my work shirt. The camera crew arrived at 9 a.m. Aubrey came with them, clipboard in hand, headset snug on her ears. You ready, Marisol? As I'll ever be. The first shots were of me in the van, driving through snowy streets, narrating my day. Then footage of me guiding Tasha through a site, replacing filters, inspecting ductwork, talking clients through repair options. Then came the sit-down interview. The lights were hot, the boom mic hovered just out of frame. Aubrey sat behind the camera. Tell us, she said, what's been the hardest part? I thought for a moment. The doubt, I said, not just from others, from myself. There were days I didn't think I had it in me. Days I thought maybe everyone was right, that this wasn't a space for women. But I kept going. I kept building. Aubrey nodded. And what do you want young women to hear from you? I looked straight into the lens. That you're not less because you work with your hands, that your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's, and that you can be proud of what you build, even if no one else understands it yet. When the interview ended, there was silence. And then applause. From the crew, from Aubrey, even from Tasha, who had quietly stepped into the room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it all in my head. The next morning, I received another message. This one was from my father. Saw the preview clip. Didn't know how strong you'd become. I'm proud of you. I didn't cry, but I smiled. Because he'd never said that before. The video went live 3 days before Christmas. It spread faster than I ever imagined. By New Year's, it had over 100,000 views. Requests flooded in. Schools wanted me to speak. Women from all over the country reached out. Some who had left the trades, others who wanted to join. I answered every message. Then one evening, as I was locking up my workshop, Aubrey called. Marisol, she said, do you know a man named Hector Rivera? My heart stopped. Why? He contacted the network, said he has something for you. Something your family buried years ago. The snow outside my shop window swirled like a warning. What kind of something? He wouldn't say. Only that it would change how you see everything. I sat down hard on the nearest bench. Hector Rivera. That name hadn't crossed my mind since I was a child. He was my uncle, my mother's estranged brother, the one who vanished from family events after a falling out. The one they never talked about. "He wants to meet," Aubrey said. "He's already in town." I took a breath. The air felt heavier now. "Set it up," I said. Because the story I thought I was telling, the story of a technician turned businesswoman, was about to unravel. And the truth, buried beneath years of silence, was clawing its way back to the surface. The real reason Daniela resented me wasn't about Thanksgiving. It was about inheritance, about secrets, and about a deal struck long before I ever opened my first toolbox. I met Hector Rivera in the back of a tiny cafe off Ashland Street, the kind of place where the coffee was poured into mismatched mugs, and the owners still handwrote their menus. It was snowing again, thick lazy flakes drifting like feathers outside the window. The world felt hushed. Inside he sat alone, a navy peacoat draped over the chair next to him, his back perfectly straight. Hector hadn't aged the way I remembered from grainy photos. There were deep lines carved into the corners of his mouth, and his salt and pepper hair was swept back with precision. He looked like someone who measured his words with the care of a watchmaker. "Marisol," he said, standing as I approached. His voice was low, gravelly, and it struck something buried in my chest. A childhood memory of laughter at a long-forgotten barbecue, a hand offering me a slice of watermelon, my mother's quick, disapproving glance. "Uncle Hector," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "It's been a long time." He nodded. "Too long." A beat passed. The waitress brought over 2 steaming mugs of black coffee. He didn't doctor his. Neither did I. "Aubrey said you had something." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick, the flap sealed with a strip of brittle old tape. He placed it between us but didn't slide it forward. "What I'm about to tell you," he said slowly, "is something your mother never wanted you to know." "Then maybe she had a reason." "Maybe," he agreed, "but it wasn't a good one." He paused, eyes scanning my face as if searching for hesitation. "Your grandfather set up 2 trust funds when he was dying, one in your name, one in Daniela's. That much you probably know. But here's what they didn't tell you. Only one was meant to be used. The other was supposed to stay locked until the person turned 30. What are you saying? You weren't supposed to know you had access to it yet. The trustees, your parents, were meant to hold it until you were ready." I frowned. "But the fund's been sitting dormant. I could have used it at any time." He leaned in. "Because you were never supposed to look. They thought you wouldn't. Because you didn't go to college. Because you became the technician, the one who worked with her hands, not the one who'd need a trust. They assumed you'd forget it was there. They were going to roll it into Daniela's when she graduated." My breath caught. "That's illegal." He nodded. "It is, but it's hard to prove without documentation. That's what I have here." He slid the envelope across the table. My hands didn't tremble as I opened it. Inside were scanned copies of emails between my mother and her financial advisor. One in particular caught my eye. "Greater than, she won't use it. Marisol's chosen a different path. We'd like to consolidate the funds and place them under Daniela's future account. It'll look cleaner. There's no need for both girls to hold separate assets when one clearly won't need it." The date was 3 years ago, before Daniela had even started her MBA. "How did you get this?" I asked, heart pounding. "I was the secondary trustee. Your grandfather didn't trust anyone completely. He wanted someone neutral to keep watch. When your parents started making moves to reassign the money, I tried to intervene. They shut me out. Claimed I was overstepping. We haven't spoken since." I stared at the words written by my mother, words that made it clear what she believed about me. That I wasn't worthy of the future he tried to leave me. That I didn't matter. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come forward now?" He reached into his coat again and pulled out a thin, leather-bound notebook. "Because your grandfather left you this too, and because I watched your interview. You're building something real, Marisol. Something honest. You deserve to know where you came from." He opened the notebook. Inside were scribbled notes, handwriting I recognized from old Christmas cards, blue ink underlining passages, dollar amounts, quotes from engineers and mechanics and inventors. "He used to say," Hector murmured, running a finger down the page, "that the strongest people build with their hands, but the wisest build with their heart. He believed you'd do both." I swallowed hard. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. Light spilled through the cafe windows, casting golden lines across the table. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked. "That's up to you," Hector said. "But if you want my advice, make it public. Let them know who you are. Not with revenge. With truth. The kind that changes things." I left the cafe with the envelope tucked under my arm, the notebook clutched in one hand, my heart hammering. For days, I couldn't sleep. I reread the letters, the emails, the entries in the notebook. I thought about the girl I'd been when I first picked up a wrench. I thought about Daniela, sitting at her graduation, smiling for the cameras, unaware of what she'd been handed and what I'd been denied. And then I made a decision. I booked a small theater downtown, rented it for one evening, sent invitations not just to family but to clients, colleagues, and every woman who'd ever messaged me for advice. I called it a community appreciation night. But I knew what it really was. It was my declaration. The night arrived. I stood backstage, hands clenched around the note cards I wouldn't end up using. Tasha stood beside me, dressed in a clean blue button-down, her hair braided back. "You're going to crush it," she whispered. "Thanks," I said, voice low. "I'm not sure what this is going to do. It's going to make people listen." "That's enough." The lights dimmed. I stepped onto the stage. A spotlight warmed my skin. The room was filled, not just with supporters but skeptics. Daniela sat 2 rows from the front, flanked by my parents. I began. I told them about the first time I crawled into an attic at 15 to fix the rickety old fan that kept our summers bearable. I told them about nights spent studying pressure diagrams instead of textbooks. I told them about every smirk, every dismissal, every job I had to fight twice as hard for. And then I held up the envelope. "This," I said, "is proof that even your own family can underestimate you, but that doesn't mean they define you." I read the quote from the email. The room was silent. They thought I wouldn't need the future he left me, but I've already built one. Not from inheritance, from resolve, from grit, from belief. My voice wavered, but I kept going. We're taught that money is legacy, that the degrees we earn, the status we hold, is what matters. But I think legacy is what you leave behind when everything else is stripped away. Legacy is how you treat people when you think no one's watching. I paused. I watched my mother write me out of a future she didn't think I was good enough for, and I forgave her, not because she asked, but because I chose to move forward. At the back of the room, Aubrey recorded every word. I closed with this. If you've ever been told you don't belong, if you've ever felt like the door was slammed in your face, build your own, paint it red, hang a sign, invite others in, show them what the world forgot to teach us. That worth isn't given, it's claimed. The applause came slow at first. Then it roared. Afterward, Daniela approached me. Her eyes were red. "I didn't know," she said. "They didn't tell me. I thought you were just bitter." "You didn't want to ask," I replied. She nodded. "I won't ask you to fix it," she whispered. "I just want you to know. I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long moment. "It's not about fixing anymore," I said. "It's about what we build from here." She nodded again and walked away. The rest of the night passed in a blur. People approached me with hugs, handshakes, quiet words of thanks. Some asked for mentorship, others offered funding. But I kept thinking about Hector. When the room was empty, I sat on the edge of the stage, notebook in my lap. Tasha joined me. "You ready for what comes next?" she asked. "I think so. Because you know this doesn't end here, right?" I nodded. "It never ends," I said. "It just gets bigger." And the next day something did get bigger. Because a journalist from a national syndicate called Bitter. We want to feature Castillo Heating and Cooling in our Women Who Rebuilt America series. The video went viral. You're everywhere. I hung up, stunned. And then I got another message. From the mayor's office. Would you be willing to consult on a new citywide energy efficiency program? We're trying to partner with women-led businesses. I said yes. And as I stood in my workshop that night, surrounded by tools, blueprints, and a new intern filing reports in the back, I realized something. They kicked me out of Thanksgiving. But I built a seat at a bigger table. And I wasn't done yet. Because what came next would require everything I'd learned, and more. A rival company had taken notice. And they weren't pleased with the competition. What started as an insult at a family dinner was about to turn into a public battle for the future of the industry. By the second week of January, my inbox had become a battlefield. Most of the messages were supportive. Local trade school directors asking for guest lectures, former clients recommending their friends and relatives, and women from as far as Colorado and upstate New York asking how they could train under me. I was overwhelmed, but in the best way possible. And then came the email with the subject line. Timely inquiry, territory violation notice, North District Board of HVAC Standards. I opened it heart-thudding. The sender? Grainger Thermal Solutions. I knew the name. Everyone in our field did. Grainger wasn't just the biggest HVAC contractor in Northwest Ohio. They were the old guard. The legacy. The suit and tie types who walked job sites in polished leather shoes and subcontracted every inch of manual labor to someone else. They dominated contracts for schools, hospitals, and commercial buildings. I'd seen them once at a training seminar. Their regional manager had muttered something about how the trades were losing discipline by letting every Tom, Dick, and Marisol in. At the time, I let it go. Now I realized they hadn't. The email was stiff, legalistic. Greater than Dear Ms. Castillo. Greater than it has come to our attention that Castillo Heating and Cooling Services has begun accepting commercial contracts in districts traditionally served by Grainger Thermal Solutions. As per community agreement standards recognized by the North District HVAC Alliance, your enterprise may be operating outside standard territorial understandings. We would appreciate clarification on your business intentions. Greater than respectfully. Greater than Calvin W. Grainger. Greater than President and CEO. Territorial understandings? I scoffed. The Alliance was nothing but a glorified old boys club. It held no legal authority over zoning or client selection. But for decades, their silence and mutual handshakes had kept newcomers out of the most lucrative jobs. I called Iris immediately. They're testing you, she said. They saw your name in the papers and on YouTube. They know you're not part of their good old boys network, and that you're cutting into their reputation. Can they stop me? Only if you let them intimidate you. You're not breaking any laws. Their email is a bluff. Still, I didn't like being watched. And worse, I didn't like what it might mean for Tasha and the interns I was starting to train. 2 days later, we showed up to a job site, a mid-sized community library that had hired us to update their 1980s-era ductwork, and found another van already parked there. Grainger's logo, their tools, their crew. The site manager was caught in the middle. I thought you were subcontracting under them, he stammered. That's what their office told me. Said they'd sent you on their behalf. They lied, I said flatly. I handed over my contract, signed and dated. Grainger's foreman came around the side of the van. His hard hat was pristine, like he'd never stepped inside a crawlspace in his life. His name was Brad. Of course it was. No need to make this a scene, miss. I'm not making a scene. I'm taking back my job. You don't get to ghostwrite my work. He smirked. Look, maybe you're good with thermostats, but you're stepping into a field with real professionals, real business models. I didn't flinch. You mean men with money and cousins on city council? The site manager broke in. Look, I'll call it in, but I need this job finished this week. Whoever can do that keeps the contract. I turned to Brad. You in or out? He hesitated. Out, he said finally. We're not going to waste man-hours competing with hobbyists." They packed up and left. Tasha let out a breath. That was intense. I looked at her. "Get used to it. This isn't just business anymore. This is what it looks like when the gatekeepers realize the gates are open." The job went smoothly. By Friday, the system was fully updated, the staff overjoyed. They even posted a glowing testimonial on our site. But it wasn't over. The next week, I received a cease and desist letter, accusations of underbidding, of misleading clients, of violating, quote, contractor decorum. And then the permit delays started. Jobs that should have been approved in 2 days took a week. Then, 10 days. It didn't take long to figure out what was happening. Someone had friends in the zoning office. Someone was pulling strings. I sat in my van one night, snow piling on the windshield, heart aching. How many more hoops would they make me jump through? How many more battles? I thought of giving up. For a single, bitter moment, I thought of folding the business and going back to solo work. Then my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail. A woman's voice. Shaky, emotional. "Ms. Castillo? You probably don't know me, but my daughter goes to McKinley High. I saw your video. She saw it too. And, well, she told me she wants to be like you. She said she wants to fix things. Said you made her believe it was possible. I just wanted to say thank you. And I hope you don't stop. We need people like you." I sat there in silence. And then I wept. Not out of pain, not out of fear. Out of something deeper, something truer. Purpose. The next morning I did 3 things. 1. I hired a legal consultant. 2. I filed for full union certification and began lobbying for board representation. 3. I reached out to a journalist at the Toledo Herald who had covered my spotlight story. "You want to go public with this?" she asked. "I want people to see how hard it is to build something when the system's designed to keep you out." By the time the article ran, it had quotes from 5 other women-owned businesses who'd experienced the same treatment. And it had a name, the Contractor Cartel. Granger denied everything. But the damage was done. City officials called for an independent audit. Permit applications began clearing again, suspiciously fast. But it wasn't just about the business anymore. This was war. Halfway through the month, a package arrived at my door. No return label. Inside, a shattered thermostat. And a note that said, "Stay in your lane." I stared at the broken plastic and wires, then calmly tossed it in the trash. Tasha found me later, inspecting a rooftop unit. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "I'm focused." She climbed up beside me. "They're scared," she said quietly. "That's why they're doing this. Because they know what you're building is real." I looked at her. She wasn't just an intern anymore. She was a builder in the making. Then let's give them something to be afraid of. We expanded. By March, I had 3 vans, 6 employees, and a 6-month contract with the city for municipal efficiency upgrades. One morning, as I walked into the office, Iris stood by the window holding a folded letter. "This came for you," she said. "Certified mail." I opened it. It was from the Department of Trade and Labor. We were being nominated for the Small Business of the Year award. Not just local. Statewide. "Oh my God," Tasha breathed. I stood frozen. Then slowly, grinning, sat down. Before I could even speak, Iris pointed to the calendar. "Don't forget," she said, "your radio interview is in an hour." I nearly choked. "What?" Surprise! The interview aired live. I told the story, again, but this time I didn't hold back. I named names. I named fears. And I named hope. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. At the end, the host asked, "So what comes next for Marisol Castillo?" I smiled. "We're not just fixing buildings anymore. We're rebuilding the field." A pause. Then she leaned forward. "Do you ever think about Thanksgiving? About the day this all started? My eyes softened. Every day. But not with bitterness. Because they may have kicked me out of their feast. But I've started my own, and the table keeps growing. The room was silent. Then applause. And applause. And applause. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, a fire broke out at one of our job sites. And suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for recognition anymore. I was fighting to prove we hadn't been set up. Because the police said it wasn't an accident. It was arson. And we were the target. I got the call at 2:16 in the morning. My phone vibrated violently against the nightstand, its buzzing louder than the winter wind howling outside. Half asleep, I fumbled for it and saw the caller ID, Tasha. I knew something was wrong before I even answered. Mari, it's the West Side warehouse site. It's on fire. Oh God, I think someone set it. I'm already here. The trucks are trying to keep it from spreading. I was out of bed and dressed before the call ended. The roads were slick with freezing slush as I tore across town, headlights bouncing off patches of ice. I knew the building she meant. It was an old auto garage we'd leased last month, meant to become our central supply hub. We'd spent weeks reinforcing the insulation, updating the electricals, storing surplus ducting and seasonal stockpile inside. It was our future expansion. Our next chapter. When I turned onto the street, the flashing red and white lights nearly blinded me. Firefighters were braced against the bitter wind, dragging hoses and shouting over the roar of the flames. The building was engulfed, black smoke billowing into the sky like a signal. Tasha stood near the sidewalk in a parka, face pale, eyes fixed on the blaze. "You okay?" I asked, breath ragged. She nodded, but tears streamed down her cheeks. They said the fire started in the back corner, where the generator units were stacked. No electrical malfunction. It doesn't make sense. I turned to the fire captain as he approached. "We think it's arson," he said, voice clipped. "No sign of an electrical short, no storm, but traces of accelerant near the entry point." Accelerant. This wasn't a freak accident. This was a warning. They wanted to gut me, not just my business, my momentum, my credibility. But they didn't understand what they'd just done. They'd turned this into a war one could no longer fight in silence. By sunrise, the fire was out. The structure was unsalvageable. But our paperwork was digital. Inventory logged. Insurance filed. I made the calls. Not to cry. Not to complain. But to start the next steps. The first was to call my attorney. The second, to call Aubrey. She was in town again, working on a follow-up piece. When she heard what happened, she was at my door within the hour, camera crew in tow. "I'm not here to ambush you," she said. "But if you want the story told before someone else spins it, now's the time." I took a long breath and nodded. "Record everything." We filmed that afternoon, footage of the charred building, of me walking through the ash, pointing out melted copper piping and scorched circuit boards. I told the story plainly. Not with rage, with facts. "This is what progress looks like to the people who feel threatened by it," I said into the camera. "Not because I'm breaking laws, but because I'm breaking expectations." The video went viral. Again. But this time, it wasn't just HVAC professionals or aspiring tradeswomen sharing it. This time, it reached policymakers, industry regulators, and people in power. Within a week, the state fire marshal launched a formal investigation. I started receiving invitations to speak at infrastructure conferences, to consult on building code revisions. A nonprofit in Detroit called to ask if I'd help them build a female-led cooperative. My mother texted once. No words. Just a picture of the warehouse in flames with a crying emoji. As if she didn't know what years of dismissal led to. As if her silence hadn't made room for the voices now trying to bury me. I didn't respond. Because my energy was going elsewhere. I called a meeting of every employee, intern, subcontractor, and volunteer who'd touched our projects in the last year. We met in the basement of an old church still heated by the same boiler I'd fixed last winter. Folding chairs, handwritten agenda, Clipboards passed down the row. They tried to burn down a building, I told them, but they can't burn down a mission. If you're with me, we rebuild. Bigger, smarter, safer. We show them what women-led infrastructure looks like, not just in homes, but in schools, in civic contracts, in policy. No one walked out. In fact, 5 more people asked to join. Tasha stepped forward at the end. "We need a new headquarters," she said, "and I think I know where to start." Her uncle owned a disused train depot on the edge of town. Red brick, boarded-up windows, but solid foundation. He'd been trying to sell it for years, but no buyers stuck. He'll lease it cheap, might even let it go in exchange for a system rebuild. We drove out there the next morning. It was perfect. High ceilings, wide garage doors, underground storage. It smelled like rust and rain. But I saw the future. By the end of the week, we'd secured the deed. Renovations started immediately. My crews, once 2 or 3 people, now worked in coordinated shifts. We salvaged what we could from the fire site. Neighbors dropped off donations, extension cords, shelves, ladders. Clients brought pizza. Electricians I'd worked with in the past offered discounted labor. This wasn't just a rebuild. It was a revolution. One night, after a 12-hour shift, I sat on the depot steps beside Iris. "You realize you're on every news outlet now, right?" she asked, scrolling through her phone. "There's even a TikTok audio of your interview clip trending." I snorted. "Do I at least sound coherent?" "You sound like a legend." I leaned back against the railing, eyes tracing the stars above the old train yard. "How did we get here?" I murmured. "You got here," she said. "You made them listen." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was the mayor's office. Again. "Marisol, the city council is proposing a grant fund to support diverse contractor training. We'd like you to lead it. Name it. Shape it. We want to model it around what you've done." I closed my eyes. The fire had tried to stop me. Instead, it lit the path forward. But not everything burned in the fire. Among the few things we recovered was a steel lockbox, charred black but intact. Inside, project blueprints, backup hard drives, and a manila envelope. Not one of mine. It was sealed. On the front, in faded marker, to Marisol, only when you're ready. It was my grandfather's handwriting. My heart seized. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 5 pages. Each one a letter. One about patience. One about legacy. One about rage and how to tame it. One about love. And the last. A list of names. Contacts, engineers, architects, inventors. People who believed in building for everyone, not just those with titles. He'd been planning something, even in his last days. Something bigger than I ever realized. And now, the torch was mine. I called Hector. "Did you know about the letters?" He hesitated. I knew he'd left something, didn't know what. He was building something beyond our family, beyond the business. Then finish it, make it real. I stared at the list of names, and I made another decision. We wouldn't just be a company. We'd be a movement. A training hub. A development center. A voice for women, immigrants, second-chancers, and anyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong in this field. Castillo wasn't just a name anymore. It was a foundation. A month later, we held the grand reopening at the depot. Hundreds showed up. Tasha gave the opening speech. Iris organized press. Aubrey returned to film a follow-up. And in the final moment, I stepped up to the podium and said, "They called me unprofessional. They called me a threat. They even tried to erase me. But I'm still here. And this time, I brought friends." Applause. Laughter. Cheers. But just as the night seemed perfect, one of my interns ran up, phone shaking in hand. "Marisol," she gasped, "you need to see this." It was a leaked memo. From Granger Thermal Solutions. Sent internally, but now public. And at the bottom of the page, underlined in bold, Foguetais initiate Phase 2 target federal contracts. Black Castillo. They weren't done. They were taking the fight to Washington. And the next phase would challenge everything I'd built. Not just my company, but my name, my integrity, my right to lead. The next battle would decide everything. I read the leaked memo 5 times. Each word pulsed like a siren in my mind. Stories named Phase 2 target federal contracts. Black Castillo. Brenjov. Granger Thermal wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. They were planning to erase me from the industry altogether. The document was dated a week earlier. Aubrey confirmed its authenticity through one of her contacts at a whistleblower network. Someone inside Granger had leaked it anonymously, tired of the internal rot. But that wasn't the end of it. Attached to the memo was a spreadsheet, a list of federal, state, and city infrastructure projects up for bid in the next fiscal year. Next to each one was a status. Times 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 times. My company had a target on its back, and I wasn't the only one. Tasha read over my shoulder and whispered, "They're freezing out every woman-run firm on this list. Every single one." It wasn't sabotage anymore. It was systemic exclusion. We had 2 options: go public again or go legal. I chose both. First, I called my attorney, Sheila Rainey, a sharp, uncompromising advocate who'd built her career taking on corporate Goliaths. Her tone when she read the memo was ice cold. "This isn't just collusion," she said. "It's racketeering. If we can prove intent, we can bring in the DOJ." "I don't want them scared," I replied. "I want them exposed." She nodded. "Then it's time to build the case." Aubrey was already preparing her next story. "This one's going national," she said. "We're pitching it to Frontline, possibly NPR. You'll be the face." I swallowed. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew what being the face really meant. They'd dig into everything. My past, my family, my mistakes, and they'd look for any crack to drive a wedge into the story. But I also knew one thing. If I didn't stand up now, no one else would. We began gathering evidence. Emails, permit logs, testimonies from smaller firms who'd been ghosted or blocked from federal registry approvals. One woman from a minority-owned plumbing contractor told us she was removed from a bidding portal after expressing interest in a municipal prison renovation. She wasn't even given a reason. But the pattern was clear. Granger and a few of their allies had locked down the infrastructure game like it was a poker table they didn't want new players at. And they'd been winning every hand for decades. Until now. Until us. The article published 2 weeks later. Title: Asterisk, The Freeze-Out, How America's Trades Are Still Locked Behind Closed Doors. Asterisk. My photo was on the cover. Tasha's too. So were 3 other women. We gave them everything: records, testimonials, even footage of job sites we were pushed off of. Aubrey didn't hold back. The piece was brutal. Granger tried to deny it. But the internal leak shattered their narrative. Suddenly, reporters were digging. Senators started tweeting. A congressional subcommittee launched a review. The Department of Labor opened a formal inquiry. And the phones at Castillo HQ wouldn't stop ringing. Some were threats, ugly, anonymous messages that tried to scare us back into silence. But most were thank yous. "I've been waiting 20 years for someone to speak up. My daughter's welding certificate meant nothing until she saw your story. Please keep going. You're opening doors we thought were welded shut." But with the spotlight came pressure. One morning, Iris walked into my office, her face drawn. "Mari, the DOT revoked your pre-qualification for federal site contracts." "What? Why?" "No reason given. They just cited review under recommendation." My stomach dropped. Recommendation. That meant someone had whispered something. Baseless, unprovable, but effective. I slammed my desk with both palms. They're blacklisting us without saying they're blacklisting us. She nodded. Exactly. Tasha appeared at the door. Mari, there's more. She handed me a printed social media post, one that had started circulating on a contractors forum. It was a deepfake video. A heavily edited clip of me, taken from my interviews, rearranged to make it sound like I was admitting to cutting corners and bribing city officials. Where did this come from? A burner account, probably someone tied to Grainger or their legal firm. But it's spreading. I gritted my teeth. They'd crossed every line, and they were counting on me to back down. But what they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this exact moment. I called a press conference. Not a YouTube video. Not a podcast. A full press conference, hosted at the City Chamber Hall, attended by every news outlet within 500 miles. I stepped to the podium wearing my grease-stained work jacket. Not a suit, not a costume, just me. They told me to stay in my lane, I began, but I didn't know freedom came with lane restrictions. The room fell silent. We built this business from nothing. No family connections, no trust fund, just skill, sweat, and the belief that everyone deserves heat in winter and clean air in summer. A few nods, cameras clicking. Now they've tried to silence us, sabotage us, humiliate us. I held up the forged memo. But we're still here, and we're not alone. I gestured behind me. Rows of women. Electricians, plumbers, carpenters, coders, truck mechanics. Every one of them had been blocked by this system. This isn't about me anymore, I said. This is about an industry deciding who counts, who gets a voice, who gets a future. A beat. We are no longer asking, we are taking our place. The applause was thunderous. By evening, the press conference had aired on every major affiliate in the Midwest. And a day later, the governor announced the formation of a statewide Equity in Trades Council. Guess who was appointed as one of its first 5 chairs? Me! But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because that week I received a cease and desist from Grainger's lawyers. They were suing me. Defamation, contract interference, emotional distress. They wanted $3.5 million in damages. Tasha stared at the paperwork, stunned. They can't be serious. They are, I said, because they're scared. How do we fight this? I looked at Sheila, who was already reading the complaint. By showing them who they picked a fight with. We countersued. Wrongful intimidation, intentional defamation, malicious interference with emerging enterprise. The media circus was instant. For weeks, we did interviews, affidavits, public declarations. We documented every piece of sabotage, every phone call, every refusal. And then came the bombshell. A former Grainger employee flipped. She provided internal emails, spreadsheets tracking competitor suppression, minutes from secret meetings where my name was listed under elimination targets, and audio. An executive mocking our company. Mocking me. She's just an AC girl, probably still lives in a 1-bedroom and thinks changing thermostats is hero work. They'd made it personal. And now it was personal for the entire country. The trial date was set. I stood in court that morning, surrounded by people who once thought they had no power. Tasha squeezed my hand. You ready? I nodded. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I'd already won. They tried to shame me for being just an AC tech. But I built an empire on that title. And what they didn't see coming was that every bolt I'd ever turned had forged me into a warrior. And I wasn't turning back. The trial began. And before the first week ended, one of Grainger's top executives took the stand. And under oath, he confessed. He didn't even look at me when he broke. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that hums with electricity, with the unspoken understanding that something irreversible was about to happen. Calvin Granger Jr., vice president of Granger Thermal Solutions and son of the founder, sat in the witness box, his collar loose, his composure cracking around the edges. Our attorney had barely raised her voice. She'd just shown him one email, just one. Subject line, Castillo workaround. His signature sat at the bottom, beneath the damning sentence. Greater than, if we can't outbid her, we bury her. Fake inspections, delay reviews. Use the zoning guy, this ends in smoke. I felt Tasha stiffen beside me. The room didn't breathe. Mr. Granger, Sheila asked, her voice precise, almost gentle. Did you authorize this tactic? He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. Then, yes. Gasps. One of the jury members blinked in disbelief. A reporter's pen scratched furiously across a notebook. Somewhere behind me, someone whispered, "Holy hell!" It wasn't just a win. It was vindication. But the trial didn't end there. It couldn't. Because after Calvin Jr. confessed, the dam broke. Two more executives came forward. One confirmed that the deepfake video had been commissioned by a third-party PR firm, funded directly from Granger's discretionary budget. Another admitted they'd paid off a former zoning administrator to deny Castillo Heating and Cooling Services permit applications for non-compliance, based on codes that hadn't been enforced in over a decade. The judge had to recess early. It was too much, too fast. Iris and Tasha sat with me in the courthouse atrium afterward, surrounded by camera crews and microphones. "What now?" Iris asked. I exhaled. My hands trembled, not from fear, but release. Now, we finish what we started. Because even with the admissions, the lawsuit still had to play out. Granger's legal team shifted strategies. They tried to minimize damages. Offered to settle. $3.5 million. No apology. No accountability. Just money and silence. Sheila looked at me across her office table when the offer came in. "You know what I think, but it's your call, Mari." I stared at the paper. $3 million could change our company forever. New trucks, a new facility, a training academy, city contracts without dependence on biased gatekeepers. But accepting it would mean sealing the records. It would mean no public admission of guilt, no legal precedent, just a payout. A hush deal. I looked Sheila in the eye. "No, we go to verdict." She smiled. The final week of the trial felt like walking through fire. Granger's team tried to paint me as unstable, emotional, vindictive. They played the deepfake again. I stared straight ahead. Then came my testimony. 3 hours. I told the court about the first time I repaired a busted coil in a heat wave. The first time a client told me I didn't look like I belonged in the van I drove. I told them about the Thanksgiving dinner, about being asked to eat outside, and how that single insult became the spark that lit everything after. The jury cried. The judge didn't stop them. 2 days later, the verdict came down. Granger was found liable on all counts. Damages awarded to Castillo Heating and Cooling Services, $9.2 million. The courtroom erupted. Tasha hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." But I didn't feel joy. Not yet. Just wait. Because I knew this moment was bigger than me. We held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. I stood at the podium, same old work boots, same rolled sleeves. "This isn't just a win for my company," I said. "This is a win for every person who's ever been told they don't belong at the table. For every woman in a hard hat. Every kid who dreams of building instead of sitting behind a desk." Reporters shouted questions. "What will you do with the settlement?" "Are you retiring?" I smiled. "We're opening a national training center, trade certification, advocacy, legal defense, grants. Everything I didn't have. We're going to make sure the next generation does." The following months were a whirlwind. We bought a new building. A sprawling multi-wing campus in the industrial corridor, office space, classrooms, a mechanical lab. We named the Castillo Center for Skilled Excellence. The grand opening drew crowds from across the country. Senators sent representatives. Industry leaders gave speeches. Tasha gave a tour to the Secretary of Labor. And Daniela showed up. I hadn't seen her since the press conference. She stood quietly in the back of the crowd, arms crossed, eyes red. After the ceremony, she approached. "I read your grandfather's notebook," she said. "You broke into my house?" She almost smiled. "Hector showed me a copy. I wanted to understand." I nodded slowly. "You deserved the truth a long time ago," she said. "I'm sorry it took fire and courtrooms for me to see it." "I didn't need you to see it," I replied. "I needed to see it myself." She blinked. "So this is it? We're strangers forever?" I looked around at the students touring the center. The apprentices hauling toolkits. The welding sparks dancing in the training bays. "We're not strangers," I said. "We're just not family the way we used to be." And that was enough. By summer, we'd trained over 300 people. Dozens placed in union jobs, city contracts, apprenticeships. I got a letter from a 16-year-old girl in Alabama. "I want to fix the world the way you fixed broken vents. You made me believe I can." I cried reading it. Not from pain, from peace. One morning, as I prepped for a speech at the National Contractors Convention, I stood before the mirror in a navy button-down. And I saw her. The girl who was told to eat Thanksgiving dinner outside. Who was called just an AC tech. She was gone. And in her place stood someone who changed the game. Forever. The story doesn't end there. There were more battles. More barriers. But every time I felt like breaking, I remembered the cold. That night, I stepped off my sister's porch. The wind biting. My van idling in silence. And the decision I made. To stop asking for a seat. And build the whole damn table instead. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Coming off the heels of the trial and the opening of the Castillo Center, I thought things might settle down. They didn't. Instead, the pace quickened like a machine shifting into higher gear. The day after we cut the ribbon on the new campus, the governor's office called again. They wanted a regional advisory panel built around what we'd created. "We're not just thinking HVAC now," they said. "We're talking energy grid updates, smart home retrofits, urban efficiency upgrades. We want you on the ground floor." They didn't need to ask twice. I was already building the blueprint in my head. But even as the public eye turned toward what we were building, even as Tasha began onboarding the first cohort of Castillo Fellows, and Iris handled press requests like she was born for it, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was still circling, just out of sight. The trial was over. Grainger Thermal was paying damages. Some of their board members had resigned, but their influence hadn't dissolved. It had only scattered. That was when the emails started arriving. Not threats, not insults. Whispers. Anonymous tips. Screenshot threads. Voice memos from burner numbers. They all said the same thing. Grainger wasn't done. The company had begun shifting its operations offshore. Shell corporations were being created. Funding was being moved into a newly formed LLC with vague infrastructure objectives and a registered agent in Delaware. Their name wouldn't be on the building anymore, but the power behind it would be the same. I knew a pivot when I saw one, and it made sense. Because even when you cut the head off a hydra, the body still twitches. I pulled up my files from the DOJ inquiry and started building a new map. Connections, names, paper trails. And then I found it. Buried in the documentation from the trial, a single line item marked Reserve Strategic Phase 3. It hadn't come up in court. It was buried in expense reports. But it matched the timeline of something I'd seen in one of the leaks. A diagram, blueprints. Not of a building, of a digital platform. I called Aubrey. You busy covering Congress? Always. But I'm guessing this is good. I think Granger's trying to digitize the gatekeeping. A pause. I'm listening. The idea was as ambitious as it was horrifying. A central contracting platform designed to manage federal and private bids. On the surface, it would look transparent, streamlined, automated. But in the background, algorithms designed to flag and downrank bids from new players, minority-owned businesses, and companies with non-standard credential paths. Gatekeeping without fingerprints. Bias disguised as efficiency. They wanted to build the very system that would control whoever got a seat at the table again. And if they succeeded, our victory would become a footnote. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I drove to the depot. The training bays were quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of thermostats clicking in unison. I sat at my workbench and opened the original envelope my grandfather had left me. The fifth letter. I hadn't fully read it before. I couldn't bring myself to. Now I did. Greater than if they ever try to build the wall higher. Don't climb it. Don't knock. Build the crane that lifts everyone over. Or build the sledgehammer. He knew. Somehow he knew what was coming. By sunrise, I had a plan. I called a meeting of our partners. Former competitors. New allies. Independent contractors. Tech consultants. If they're going digital, I said, then so are we. We would build our own platform. Open source. Transparent. A matchmaking engine for clients and contractors that didn't gatekeep behind legacy biases. We called it TARP Core Line, NARP Core Line. Tasha brought in a friend from MIT Iris-coordinated beta testers. Aubrey agreed to document the build publicly. Within a month, we had a prototype. We launched quietly, and within 2 weeks, we had 2,000 signups. Granger's shadow project launched under the name InfraSelect. Their interface was sleek. Their team, former lobbyists. Their reviews, all corporate fluff. But the difference was this. Ours worked. Because ours wasn't built to protect the past. It was built to unlock the future. By the end of the second month, we'd facilitated 3,200 job matches. Cities from Iowa to New Mexico started adopting the platform for public bids. And then, on the 6th Monday after launch, something happened that changed everything. The White House called. A member of the Small Business Technology Advisory Council asked me to attend a panel. We're building the future of infrastructure and AI, they said, and we think you should be on the team. I didn't say yes immediately. Not out of hesitation. Out of reflection. Because 3 years ago I was sleeping in my van between jobs. And now? Now I was being asked to help shape the country. When I told Tasha, she screamed, "You're going to DC?" "I guess I am." She hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs cracked. "Promise me one thing," she whispered. "What's that?" "You'll still come back." I promised. Because home wasn't a porch that rejected me. It was the ground I built beneath my own 2 feet. Washington was surreal. Suits, security, meetings in marble buildings with ceilings taller than some of my clients' entire homes. But I wore my work boots. Every single day. "It reminds them," Iris said, watching me on C-SPAN, "that you didn't come through the front door, you knocked it off its hinges." They listened to me. And when they didn't, I spoke louder. I told them about the deepfakes, the sabotage, the sweat equity, and they listened. By fall, CoreLine became a federally approved optional procurement system for regional bids. And InfraSelect? Its parent company dissolved under audit. Because whistleblowers don't stop at one truth. And truth doesn't stop growing when you feed it sunlight. That Thanksgiving, I cooked alone in my tiny apartment. Turkey breast, garlic mash, apple pie from a family recipe, and a new chair at my table. Not for someone else. For me. Because I'd earned it. Because sometimes the person you need to forgive most is the one you used to be. That night, as snow fell outside and the radiator hissed quietly, I poured myself a glass of cider. I thought about the girl in the driveway, the woman who walked away, and the legacy she chose instead. But it still wasn't over. Because, in the middle of the night, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't Daniela. It wasn't Granger. It was someone else. Someone I hadn't seen since I was 14. She stood in the hallway, soaked from the storm, eyes rimmed red. "Marisol," she said, voice trembling, "I'm your sister, your real sister. They never told you, but I've been looking for you." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my family, about my name, about where I came from, began to unravel. She said her name was Liana. She had the same eyes as me. Brown, wide, set slightly too far apart. The kind our grandfather used to joke could see both ends of a workbench at once. I hadn't heard that voice in more than 2 decades, because I hadn't known it existed. "They told me I was adopted," she said, soaked to the skin in my hallway, arms wrapped tightly around herself like armor. "But they never told me from where. Not until last year. And not everything. I didn't invite her in at first. I couldn't. Not until I understood what kind of bomb she'd just dropped into the middle of my life. My mother died when I was 14, she said. Car accident. I was placed with a foster family in Cincinnati. They said I had no blood relatives. But last year I did one of those DNA tests. Just for fun. And it came back. Well, there you were. You're saying we're, what, half-sisters?" She nodded. "Same father." I didn't move. Couldn't breathe. "And let me guess," I said. "You didn't know his name either?" "I do now," she said quietly. "Alejandro Castillo." The room spun. That name. Our father. A man who left when I was 4. A name I hadn't spoken out loud in years. The story my mother always gave me was neat. Simple. He left. He couldn't handle the responsibility. He vanished. I never questioned it. Until now. "They erased me," Liana said, "and they lied to you." Eventually, I let her in. She stood in my living room like she didn't want to touch anything. Still wet, still shivering, still breaking something in me just by being here. "I didn't come to wreck your life," she said. "I swear, I didn't want to be alone anymore, and I needed to know who I was." I brought her a towel, made her tea, listened as she told me about growing up with people who always treated her like a guest, how she never felt like she belonged, how she'd bounced from house to house until she aged out of the system, how she'd worked nights to put herself through community college, how she'd once considered becoming an HVAC tech herself but couldn't afford the tools. "So instead I work at a shipping warehouse," she said. "I fix labelers, compressors, anything that buzzes and makes managers panic." "You fix things," I whispered. She nodded. "I always have." She stayed the night. On the couch. I didn't sleep. I spent the whole night reading the DNA report she emailed me, double-checking dates, names, records. It was real. And it wasn't just real, it was undeniable. We were sisters. The next morning I called Hector. "Did you know?" His voice was heavy. I suspected. "Your father, he wasn't a saint. But he wasn't a ghost either. He loved you. But your mother made sure he stayed gone." "Why?" "Because she didn't want competition. Not for inheritance. Not for legacy. And not for love." It all came rushing back. The trust fund. The decisions. The emails. The cold precision with which my family had dismissed me. And now I understood. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. They didn't just write me out. They rewrote the past. Liana stayed for 3 days. We worked side by side at the depot. She was smart, quick. Her hands moved like mine, muscle memory built from years of troubleshooting. She picked up on vent mapping faster than any apprentice I'd ever had. "You sure you never trained professionally?" I asked. She grinned. Only in the jungle of YouTube and broken machines. We laughed. A lot. But there was still a wall between us. One neither of us could name yet. Until she said it. You built all this. Without them. Without me. And now I just show up. And what? I'm your sister again? Just like that? I don't know what you are yet, I said honestly, but you're not nothing. She nodded. That's enough. The next week, I took her to a job site. Small office unit, faulty thermal lines, nothing glamorous. But she watched everything, learned. On the third visit, I handed her a toolkit. Your lead today. Seriously? Seriously. She hesitated, then took the tools, and got to work. By the time we finished, the client offered her a retainer position. She turned it down. I've got a better gig, she said. We drove back in silence. Until she asked, can I stay? I nodded. For now, as long as you want. And that night, we built something I hadn't had since childhood. Family. Not the kind you inherit. The kind you earn. But life doesn't pause just because your personal history cracks open. 2 days later, we got a call from the Department of Energy. We want Castillo to lead a national task force on workforce expansion and vocational pathways. It was the biggest project yet. And it meant travel. Long meetings. Policy. Politics. And it meant I had to decide, stay in Toledo or take the mission nationwide. I told them I needed a week. Liana helped me think. You've already changed the world here, she said. But if they're giving you the blueprint to go bigger, maybe it's time. What if it all falls apart? Then you'll fix it. That's what you do. I gave them my answer. Yes. And by spring, I was traveling. Boston, Denver, Sacramento. Everywhere I went, people greeted me with the same words. Thank you for showing us what's possible. At the same time, Coreline expanded. Over 200,000 contractors. 50,000 successful placements. And a growing alumni network of Castillo Fellows now launching businesses of their own. Liana took over operations at the depot. And she thrived. By fall, she was leading her own crew. Tasha and Iris built a mobile training program. They called it Gritline. Because not everyone has a campus nearby. But everyone deserves a shot. And then one day, standing on a rooftop in Phoenix, teaching a group of veterans how to identify coolant failures. My phone rang. It was Daniela. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to. Mom had a stroke, she said. It's bad. They're not sure if she'll wake up. I was on a flight the next morning. When I walked into the hospital room, she looked impossibly small. So much of my anger had been shaped by her. And now, she was just a woman. A woman who made choices. Some of them cruel. Some of them cowardly. But a woman, nonetheless. I sat by her bed, held her hand, and whispered, I'm still standing. And I'm still building. You couldn't stop that. She didn't stir. And maybe she never would. But I needed her to hear it anyway. When I walked out, Daniela stood in the hallway. You didn't have to come. I know. Do you forgive her? I looked through the glass at the woman who had erased a part of me. No, but I don't hate her anymore either. Daniela nodded slowly. That's something. I went back to work. Because the world doesn't wait for healing. It waits for action. And I still had work to do. But on the flight home, I opened the last unread document from my grandfather's notebook. It was a floor plan. For something called Phase Future. An education hub, trade, technology, leadership. Built on family land. Land that had been in our name for 80 years. I checked the address. It was the very same lot where Daniela now lived. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't laugh. I just picked up the phone. Hey, I said. Daniela answered. We need to talk about the house. Because legacy wasn't something you inherit. It's something you build. And if the land was mine to reclaim, then it was time to put the foundation down myself. The property sat on the edge of old farmland, just where the city started to turn into long stretches of quiet earth and power lines. The sun was setting behind the tree line when I pulled up to the front gate. It looked different now. Daniela had renovated the old farmhouse, new siding, modern windows, a stone path lined with lavender and solar lights. It was the kind of place people dreamed about retiring to. But beneath the wildflowers and white fences was something older, deeper. Our grandfather's land, and the site of his last vision. I parked the truck and stared through the windshield. Part of me didn't want to go in. Not because I feared Daniela, but because I feared what it would mean to ask. To take back something I never knew was mine. The front door opened before I knocked. She stood there in jeans and a sweatshirt, no makeup, her hair pulled back. A mug of tea steamed in her hand. "Didn't think you'd come," she said. "Didn't think I would either." She stepped aside, and I walked into a home I hadn't entered in years. The furniture was different, but the bones were the same. The bay window where we used to sit with coloring books. The fireplace where she roasted marshmallows too close to the flames. "You want to talk about the house," she said, sitting at the edge of the sofa. "Yeah." I handed her the folder. The blueprints. The deed. The letter our grandfather wrote, dated 6 months before his death, marked with his initials and a notarized seal. She read it in silence, then looked up. "He wanted to build a school here." "Not just a school," I said, "a center, trades, equity, access. He called it Phase Future, said this was where the next generation would learn to make things that last." And Mom never said a word. She didn't want it built. Why? Because it wasn't about her. She closed the folder. "So what do you want to do?" "Buy you out. Use the settlement money. Restore the land. Build what he planned." "And if I say no?" "Then I go through court. I file a historical claim. It'll take time. It'll be messy. But eventually I'll win." Daniela didn't flinch. She just sipped her tea. Then quietly, "You still angry at me?" "Yes, but it doesn't change what needs to happen." A long silence stretched between us. Then she stood, walked to the window. "You know, I never understood you," she said. "Not really. I thought your stubbornness was weakness, that your job made you small, that you were too proud to ask for help. And now I see I was wrong." I let her words sit. "So what do you say?" She turned. "You don't have to buy me out." I blinked. "What?" "I'll donate the land. In his name, you build it. I'll help, whatever you need." I stood there, stunned. "Why?" She gave a sad smile. "Because maybe I finally understand what it means to build something that matters." We signed the papers the following week. Together. And within days, the foundation was laid. Phase Future was reborn. The work was harder than anything we'd done before. Zoning variances, historical overlays, environmental reviews, funding partnerships. But the doors opened the following spring. 4 wings. 1 for construction, 1 for design, 1 for coding and systems, and 1 simply called Legacy, a place where students could learn the history of working hands. The ones that built bridges, railroads, safe homes, and safer futures. Tasha became Director of Innovation. Iris ran Community Outreach. Liana managed Workforce Development. And Daniela? She handled operations. I never thought I'd say it, but she was good. Efficient. Precise. Relentless. We were different. Still clashed. But we were finally moving in the same direction. One evening, after closing up the welding lab, I found a folded letter taped to my office door. The handwriting was shaky. Old. It was from my mother. "Marisol, if you're reading this, it means I've passed. I'm sorry I couldn't say these things face to face. I know I failed you. Not once, but many times. I let fear guide me, fear of being left behind, fear of not understanding the child who didn't follow the path I had carved. But you carved your own, and you did it with strength I will never fully understand. Take what was once broken and keep building. You were always meant to lead, even if I couldn't see it. I sat down. Let the tears come. Because it wasn't forgiveness. It was freedom. The ribbon cutting for Faye's future drew hundreds. Alumni, families, state leaders, workers who hadn't touched a classroom in decades, but now came back to teach. I gave a short speech, then handed the mic to Liana. She told the crowd what it meant to be found. To go from a number in the system to a name on the door. My sister didn't just build a business, she said. She built a mirror, so the rest of us could see who we really are. I stood beside her, stunned. Because I never saw myself as anything more than a fixer. But now, the world saw more. That night, after everyone left, Daniela and I sat on the porch. She passed me a glass of wine. Did you ever think we'd be here? Not once. She laughed. Same. We stared out at the lot. The solar panels. The wind turbines. The kids laughing in the dorms. She turned to me. You think he'd be proud? I know he would. Because this wasn't just a school. It was a second chance. For all of us. But there was still one more surprise. A week later, I got a call from the Library of Congress. They wanted to archive our story. Document our footage. Make Castillo a permanent part of the national record. There's a whole generation, the curator said, that needs to know what happened when a woman got kicked off the porch and built a nation instead. I didn't have words. Just a long breath. And a whisper. Let's get to work. Because the legacy wasn't finished. Not even close. The first business card. The warehouse fire. The lawsuit. The discovery of Liana. The reconciliation with Daniela. The letter from my mother. I thought winning meant proving everyone wrong. But it doesn't. It means proving to yourself that you were never wrong for believing in your own worth. I pointed to the wall behind me, where a banner read, Castillo, for every future we build. We named this place Faye's Future because it's not about one moment. It's about all the ones to come, the apprentices who will walk through these halls, the veterans retraining for civilian work, the young girl in a trailer park who just wants to fix the heater for her grandmother, the single father who wants to show his son he's not a failure. I looked out over the audience. They are our future, and we are building it together. Standing ovation. Flashes from cameras. Cheering. Whistles. But I didn't feel pride. I felt peace. After the event, I walked the perimeter of the campus alone. The rain had stopped. Clouds thinning. Everything was quiet. Until I reached the south end, where the concrete was still drying around a new cornerstone. Etched into it were the words, "Nopotea legacy is not inheritance, it's impact." I knelt beside it, tracing the groove of the lettering. And I whispered, "Thank you, Abuelito." A hand touched my shoulder. Daniela. "That was a hell of a speech," she said. I didn't cry this time. You almost did. We both laughed. Then she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "Read it." I opened it. Inside, a signed deed transfer. Daniela was gifting me her remaining share of the land. Unconditional. "You earned this," she said. "All of it." I stared at her. "Why now?" "Because I want to be part of what you're building, not just adjacent to it. And because for once, I'm choosing to let go of control." I hugged her. The kind of hug we hadn't shared since we were kids. And for the first time, it felt real. That night, we hosted our first alumni dinner. Tables stretched the length of the new assembly hall. People passed plates, swapped stories, clinked glasses. No one asked where anyone went to school. No one asked how much money they made. They just laughed. and existed, and belonged. Later, I stepped outside with Liana. She lit a small candle and placed it under the tree at the edge of the lot. "What's that for?" I asked. "For the ones who didn't get to make it here." I nodded. "We carry them. Always." As we walked back inside, someone called my name. A young woman, maybe 19, hands still dusty from the day's lessons. "Miss Castillo?" "Yes." "I just wanted to say thank you. My dad said I couldn't do this, that I'd never belong in a trade. But now I'm the first in our family with a certificate, first with a union card, first to build something from scratch." I didn't know what to say, so I hugged her. And in that hug was every job I'd ever worked, every rejection, every van ride, every insult, every moment of doubt. All of it, justified. Because she was the reason. She, and everyone like her, was why I kept going. Later that night, after the guests had gone, I walked through the building alone. Every hall, every workroom, every tool rack. I turned off the lights one by one, until only the entrance was left. I stood beneath the main sign, "Trum's Welcome to Phase Future." And for the first time in my life, I felt full. Not just of purpose, but of joy. Because what started as exile became empire. And what they meant to break me, built me instead. This was never just about Thanksgiving. It was about every moment after. Every life touched. Every story made possible. Every future unlocked. And I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.